All right, hello and welcome to another episode of the Transformative Principal Podcast. This is Mike Caldwell, your host, and joining me all the way from Indiana is Scott Bess. Scott, welcome.
Mike, good to see you. Happy to be on.
Well, let's break things up a little bit. I have 5 rapid fire questions, and then we'll get into a little bit of your background.
Sure.
and then get into the meat and potatoes of the thing of this conversation. But let's start with what do you see as one outdated practice in education you would eliminate tomorrow?
Oh, for sure. The discrete subject areas in high school where you go from math to English to social studies, and then the time block, like everything lasts 18 weeks or 36 weeks. I would blow that up tomorrow if I could.
Ooh, love it. What's one innovation you think will become mainstream within the next decade? I think I know the answer. It's got to be, but I'm curious on what you're going to say on this.
No, I think we're going to see even more proliferation of micro schools and distributed education. And I think as the tools catch up with some of that, it's going to become even more prevalent.
Not what I expected. I'm intrigued with the answer though. What's something schools should measure that they currently don't?
I think measuring everything a student is doing inside and outside of school. There's so much learning that happens outside the school walls, and it may as well not happen in terms of how the schools see it. So I think if they could find ways to capture everything a student is doing, because they're doing amazing things on their own, and we just never see it.
Yeah. Well, building off of a little bit of your background in IT, what's one lesson education could learn from the tech sector?
Oh, I think innovate or die. Like in the tech sector, if you haven't innovated, you just go away. And I think in education, we just haven't learned that lesson yet. And we hang on. Everybody talks about, if you look at the diploma from the early 1900s. It looks a lot like the diploma of today, right? And if you look at how you got the diploma, it looks like how you get the diploma today. So I think that innovation that has happened everywhere else hasn't happened in education. And my fear is that we're going to become obsolete if we don't adapt quickly.
Last question. What's a misconception people have about charter schools or school innovation? You choose.
Oh God, yeah, charter schools. It's easy. Like they skim kids. They only take high-end kids. They don't take special education. It costs money to go to voucher school. Like there's like a greatest hits that like teachers unions and others trot out every time, and we spend a lot of time going, no, that's actually not true. This is the reality, and this is what happens. So, yeah, those are like the big misconceptions that exist.
Yeah, awesome. Well, if we were doing a 3 minutes and 20 minute podcast, we'd be wrapping up
Boom.
right now. And those are some good nuggets right there. Yeah, maybe that's what we should micro pods.
That's right.
3 minutes or less. Well, Scott, you're the president of the Indiana Charter Innovation Center, previously founded the Indiana Charter School Association, and also a member of the Indiana State Board of Education.
Right.
So you have your hands in a lot of different pots, all connected to education. But that's not where you've had an interesting career. Talk a little bit about your background in IT, and I won't spoil it for the audience here. Give me a little flavor of where you're coming from.
No, I always tell people like you should never come to me for career advice because my career path has been a meandering journey. I started off my career as a teacher, like came out of college, went right into teaching, coached for several years, and then I went, man, there's got to be a different way to do this. And again, this to give you some context. I was teaching computers to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders on Apple IIe's. So that'll give you a little bit of a time frame reference. And I just got frustrated with
someone in their 20s. I'm really surprised.
Yeah, right. Yeah. As young as I am. Yeah. I went into the museum and got those IIe's. But I got frustrated with like, it didn't, even then, back in the mid 80s, it didn't feel like that there should be better ways to do it. And it just wasn't possible then. And so I left and went into the IT world and worked my way up at a couple different companies. and he eventually wound up as the CIO at Goodwill Industries of Central Indiana. And so that, I learned a lot. I was working for a somewhat soul-sucking utility company as I was head of IT for one of their business units for a bit, and went through a corporate reengineering, which, say what you want about that, and you get all these big consulting firms that were, getting paid a lot of money. But I learned a lot about how do you look at an enterprise and think about how do you redo that? Like, how do you take the practices that you were doing and look ahead and say, how should we start doing this in the future? And so that was a kind of a pivotal moment for me, going, oh wait, like this is IT stuff, but it applies almost anywhere. And so as I got back into education at Goodwill, and we can talk about more about that, but we started a small charter school because I had all this education background. I'd also been on got elected to my local school board, and I was on that for 16 years. And so taking that education experience and then going, hey, you're the CIO, you got all this education experience, can you help oversee our charter high school? And that got me back into education, which then led to some other things.
Now, is that when you created the Excel Center?
It was, yeah. So the recession hit in 2008, right? So your listeners would remember, I mean, that was nationwide. And it turns out that people who did not have a high school diploma, they just got annihilated in the workforce. And so they would come into Goodwill, and obviously Goodwill helped people prepare for, find, and keep jobs. And what we found is people lost their job, came in through the doors. We helped them get a job, typically a low-paying job. Then they would lose that job, come back in the doors. And our president at the time at Goodwill, Jim McClellan, who's a mentor of mine, said, hey, look, we've got to figure out what's the commonality of these folks. And we found that over half the people coming in for assistance didn't have a high school diploma. And so there was I don't know if it's famous or infamous weekend, I went home and looked through Indiana State Code and came back in on a Monday and said, hey, Indiana does not have an upper age limit on who can get a diploma, nor a limit on who can get funded for one. And so we put together a really small group of people, actually came up with the design of the Excel centers, went into the Indianapolis mayor's office and said, we've got an idea. Would you guys authorize us? And they were like, absolutely yes. And so we launched in 2010 with one school. We were going to launch with 200 people. The demand drove it to 300. And then within that first year, I told a story the other day to some folks, like we had this idea of what the school would be. And this is like the innovative part, reengineering part comes around, like what we thought would work didn't. And like in October, November of that first year, we're like, not only is no one going to graduate, I'm not sure anyone's ever going to get a credit. And so rather than get fired, we're like, now what do we do? And that's where we came up with essentially the basic function of what the Excel centers are today, with 5 terms a year, flexible scheduling, all the things, but a lot of in-person instruction. And so then the second year we added 2 new schools. The year after that we added 2 more. The year after that we added 4 more. Then we also started to license that to other Goodwills around the country. And today I'm on the board of the one in Washington, D.C. We have 2 schools now and likely have a third in a couple of years. And I think there's now 60 plus Excel centers around the country serving tens of thousands of students. And I was just reading a University of Notre Dame did a study of graduates of the Excel centers, and they found that the economic outcomes of the graduates are amazing, like tens of thousands of dollars after they graduate and are, they have a credential that they can take into the workforce, and their income is rising tens of thousands of dollars. So people who were on public assistance no longer are on public assistance and actually are paying taxes. And, if you got someone in their late 20s or early 30s, they're going to be paying taxes for 30 plus years. And so the return is amazing. And so every state we've been in where we talk to the legislators, they're like, oh yeah, we need more of that. So that really got me back into education and fired up that innovation thing. And I honestly tell people I'm more of a problem solver. Like here's a problem. How do we go about fixing that, and then create something?
Yeah, I love that. I'm just curious when you said, it wasn't working, you
Yeah,
launched, you had this idea
yeah,
of what it should look like, and then you pivoted.
yeah,
What was it that existed originally, and
yeah,
and and why wasn't it working?
yeah. This will probably come as no shock to your listeners, and probably something we should have known then. Our original idea was, hey, we're going to use a lot of online instruction, or we're still going to have supports around them. So we're going to have teachers and life coaches and all those things, but it's going to be self-paced because we think, students are going to come at different levels. We'll let them advance at their own pace. And then again, it was around October, November. Wait a minute. Every single student here has quit something that they knew was really important. And so their general level of self-motivation probably isn't incredibly high. And so, because what we found was they just were spinning their wheels and nothing happening. And we started to see when we started to do like some small group instruction with some students, like, oh wait, then they start moving. And so that's where we said, okay, look, we really do need to keep this as flexible as possible because adults have different needs. They're gonna float in, they're gonna float out because of stuff their kids have going on, or they picked up another part-time job. But you do have to have high quality teacher-led instruction for them and setting some deadlines for them to help them go, oh wait, this is something I can do. And once we did that, then people took off. They were able to amass credits quickly because we knew that if someone came to us with, no high school credits, we couldn't have them put their life on hold for 4 years. So you had to integrate a bunch of stuff. So we did integrated classes like English and government and other social studies, like bringing those things together so that they could earn multiple credits in one class. That really helped people accelerate. And once they started to accelerate, then it became self-fulfilling. It's like, oh wait, I'm really moving towards my graduation. I can get there. And so, but those first few months of self-pace on your own, and again, I think we found that during the pandemic, students who were kind of on their own just didn't do well and still aren't doing well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm on a board for a charter school that works with pregnant and parenting teens here in Idaho, and just this last year, kind of flipped the learning model from more of a traditional kind of structure to self-paced with still a teacher in the room, but they're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I think this would be, they have some elements, I think, of what you're talking about, but I think they're still trying to figure out how do you get these kids, oftentimes that are, well behind,
Right.
fast track to a degree. And one of the things that we haven't talked about, I don't believe, with them is the idea of the integrated kind of coursework where you're kind of getting multiple credits from one type of experience.
That's right.
So I mean, I could probably spend the whole podcast just talking about the Excel Center. I'm really intrigued with that, but we'll you have a lot of other things going on, so we'll skip that. But Excel Center, and it's, how many different states? Just out of quick.
Oh gosh, I think 15 different states.
And they're all kind of following the same model that you evolved to, and
okay. They're all affiliated with Goodwills across the country.
Okay.
And I think actually I just saw something today. It looks like Puerto Rico is the next one to come online. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And do you have any like touch points with these schools, or are they kind of just like adopt a program and almost like a franchise type deal?
It's somewhat of a franchise. I think the Goodwill of Central Indiana, which still quote unquote owns the concept, they have a team that works with all the different states. Now you'll see some individual differences based on local needs and so forth, but
sure,
really they all follow the same basic pattern. 5 terms a year, 8 week terms last 8 weeks. They do rolling enrollments out of those terms, rolling graduation. So it's pretty unique. Again, I've gotten to stay involved since I went on the board of the Excel Center in DC, and so I was actually just out there. They had their 10th anniversary, and this coming year they'll hit their 1,000th graduate. And even in a city the size of DC, if you take 1,000 adults and take them from not having a diploma to having one plus some kind of credential, you start to notice that in the workforce, and then the impact on their children, because now they're not the child of a dropout, they're the child of a graduate who now has higher level employment. That child's graduation status is likely going to be really strong too. So I think you start to see this generational impact of that. And as you get the numbers up, you really do start to feel a difference in the city.
I'm curious, for our listeners, you might have a listener out there that's, high school principal that, in a traditional public school, or even, it doesn't matter, private, charter, whatever. And they're trying to figure out, how do we provide a better maybe environment for these kids that fail the traditional system. And they're probably not in a position just to go start a charter school or adopt maybe the Excel. Like what are some ingredients that maybe kind of any principal that's listening should say, okay, I need to rethink how we're doing X, move closer to Y, because that's showing success.
Yeah, and I think my answer, at some level, put my State Board of Ed hat on. As I talk to my peers around the country, almost every state board has some sort of waiver, freedom to, if a school have an idea, typically most state boards are saying, bring us your ideas, we'll listen to it, right? And even there are some things where principals will say, oh, I want to do this thing, but we can't. And the reality is they actually could. There isn't anything that prohibits it. So a great example, I've got a good friend that runs it's a small rural high school here in Indiana, and he has a set of kids every year that he knows, just as you described, are probably not on a track to graduate successfully. And so he has created a subgroup within the school that says, hey, look, you're going to come in here, we're going to, and again, looking at interest, whether you're interested in manufacturing, interested in construction, interested in something, right, we're going to actually teach every subject in the context of that. And so they'll spend, and really starting their freshman year, spend part of their time out of the building, understanding, learning about the thing they're interested in, and then the rest of the time they're in, but they're not going math to English to social studies to science. They're doing everything in the context of that and team teaching a lot of that. And what he's found is the engagement of those students goes off the charts. Kids who had chronic absenteeism in middle school or their freshman year all of a sudden are like, well, no, I'm coming to school because I get to go do this thing. And he literally didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to ask for a waiver. It's like, you're still teaching the courses. You're a certified teacher is granting the credits. There's no one comes in and polices how you teach. And so he's been able to do that. And I would say he's one of the more innovative superintendents in the state, or in the country for that matter, because he also started his own charter micro school that's adjacent to his district. And he's pulling a lot of kids who were previously homeschooled back into the public system, because he's got a really flexible system, and the kids love it. So there you have a traditional public school superintendent who's doing innovative things within his district and started a charter micro school kind of off to the side, which now is going to grow into a network of micro schools around the state. So I think the answer to your question, there's almost no limit to what people can do. They sometimes get stuck. I remember I was talking to a principal one time. I said, hey, what's the most innovative idea you've ever had? Like that you're almost scared to go ask your superintendent because you think you were crazy. And he looked at me, he goes, man, if we could just do a double block trimester. I'm like, all right. Sure. Yeah. Double block trimester, that'll change everything. Like it's people get stuck in this th- like there's almost no limit to what you can do in the public systems. And I tell people all the time, like, try to break out. And by the way, one of my criticisms of the charter sector is by and large, while the outcomes are generally better, we have a couple studies that just released here in Indiana that shows the charter sector has outperformed their peer districts in growth of students since the pandemic. Like, so we got some really strong evidence. But I don't think anyone would say that the sector has been terribly innovative. They're probably better run. They've got more, they've got people that work really hard. But if you walk into the school, you still see kids sitting at desks and listening to a teacher and taking tests. Like it doesn't, we haven't really changed much of anything. Again, there are some that kind of push the boundaries a little bit. But I think that's my challenge to the charter sector here in Indiana is take advantage of the freedoms you got. Like no one says you have to keep a kid in a seat for 36 weeks to get a credit in algebra. Like if they can do it in 12, do it in 12. Like, or if they need to take 50, take 50. Like there's nothing says you have to do that other than that's how it's been done. And I think that's, kind of back to our point when we started, like if we're going to get rid of the Carnegie Unit and all those things, which by the way, the Carnegie Foundation is trying to get rid of the Carnegie Unit. Like that's their new mission, right? And we've got to start pushing to make that happen.
Yeah, we think if they're behind it,
yeah, right.
that should be enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Micro schools has been, I was just meeting with a leader similar role to you in a different state yesterday, and we were talking about micro schools, and he's actually starting his own with his wife in Colorado, and it seems like it's really, I mean, the micro school movement is really gaining a lot of traction. I know it's not necessarily a new thing. I think they've been a long time, but for post pandemic, it seems like they're really gaining traction, and I can understand why. There's some challenges with it, I think, that are still trying to figure out and things like that. So what are you seeing in your state on the micro school side? And maybe before you answer that question, how do you, I guess, describe or define what a micro school is, and then kind of what are you seeing in your state?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the definition, because I get that all the time, like, well, how big? Like, well, okay, I've seen micro schools with 5 kids in someone's house to 200 kids in a building where everybody goes, right? And I think what I come down to is it's more about how the school operates, and if it is largely teacher driven without a lot of administrative overhead, and there's a ton of flexibility. So in other words, it's not necessarily time based in terms of this class lasts this long and then you'll get a grade, but it's largely mastery based, a lot of flexibility in how kids interact with the school, and a ton of teacher autonomy. Like to me, that's the heart of a micro school, and I think you'd see that in different places. I went to one.
More about the modality,
That's right,
or kind of structure versus the size.
That's right. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
And I think we're seeing, as you mentioned, since the pandemic, especially, you saw a lot of homeschool pods get created. And the interesting thing was a lot of those were more with people with means who could group of parents say, hey, we're going to hire a teacher, and our kids would come together. Whereas low income kids, by and large, were stuck doing virtual and then had to go back to school when it opened. And I think this idea of a public micro school really appeals to me, and we're seeing that. I think we're going to see that take off here in Indiana, because it's bringing kids who might have been out of the system back into the system, or kids who were disaffected in a large district being able to come to something that's smaller, more intimate, but you still can actually track results, right? So I think if you in some other states where micro schools are flourishing, where they have universal ESAs, for example. And again, check your local listings on how tightly those operate. Like here in Indiana, home schools like have zero tracking. Like we don't even know who's in it. You don't have to register, you don't have to do anything, and there's no tracking of your results. You don't take state tests. The parent can issue the diploma, and like no one knows if they actually know anything or not. Whereas at a public micro school, they they participate in state testing, so we can see how those students are doing, what they know, what they don't know. I think it was interesting in the one I was talking about. Indiana does a through-year assessment, and so instead of one formative end-of-the-year assessment, we do 3 assessments during the year. And when a lot of the kids that were in this micro school had never been in school before, and so when they signed up, their parents like, hey, they did all the 4th grade curriculum, and they're moving into 5th grade, whereas age-wise they're a 4th grader, right? But when they took the first assessment, what they found was they were off the charts in some areas and way below in others, and it really depended on what the parents' capacity was. Like they read at a middle school level, but did math at a 2nd grade level because they just hadn't spent a lot of time on it, right? And so it's a way of kind of evening it out, making sure that everyone is moving. But there's also then accountability, because again, these are public, so they're getting state dollars, and now you have accountability to that school that yes, you're doing your job in educating the students, right? So I think, but there's also a ton of flexibility where some of the students come 3 or 4 days a week, some come 5 because the parent still wants to be engaged or involved. And as long as the student is learning, and like the school's responsible for saying, yes, you've mastered the material, where you got the mastery from, whether it was inside school or outside of school, doesn't matter. Like you're learning, we're making sure that you're proficient. We don't necessarily have to teach everything, right? And so the students then get to have all these different experiences. Parents can still be involved if they want to. And again, some do, some don't. But they have a ton of flexibility. And I think his school has like 60 kids in it, so they can group, regroup, multi-age, right? So you'll have a 2nd grader who reads really well with the middle school kind of group of kids, but then she's back doing math with her peers because she's not strong there. Like there's ability to, and the teachers, they manage it themselves. Like they talk daily about which kids should be with who, and they regroup. And I think it's that type of instruction. So again, a lot of it is teacher driven. There's not a ton of technology, but there's also a lot of group work. You talk about durable skills. There's a lot of that problem solving that's happening. They've gotten Project Leadway to develop some curriculum for them that's really helped, where the kids can actually do work again inside of school, outside of school, using some of that curriculum stuff. So anyhow, the point is, we think that network is going to grow from now it's a single site. I think next year they'll have 6 or 7 sites, probably grow up to a total of 500 kids, and then we think that kind of growth is going to happen year over year, where we could have 10,000 kids in those micro schools are scattered around the state. And this one happens to be rural. Some of the sites next year are going to be urban. A couple are going to be suburban. And so I think you're going to see this really interesting mix of students at these different sites. And it's not cookie cutter, right? If you have, this teacher wants to do things one way, like here's a Montessori teacher that wants to do something like, okay, that's going to be more of a Montessori base. This one's going to be more hands-on project based. Like there's, but the point is, going back to the definition, proficiency based, teacher driven, teacher autonomy, and then a ton of flexibility.
So let me test some assumptions. For the micro schools, it seems that if they are born out of an existing, whether it's a district school or an existing charter network or whatever else, be much easier to start because you have that kind of critical mass support versus, a couple parents or whatever like have this idea, or whoever, a teacher has an idea and they want to go start it from the ground up. That's a lot harder doable, and that's how some of them start.
Yep.
But it seems like it's a great opportunity, really, if I'm a district superintendent and I want to just create more choice within my district. A micro school creates a really fast track way to do that.
It does. It does. And I think it's very attractive to people who have chosen to opt out of the system because they didn't, for whatever reason. But the idea that here's something that's small, it's flexible, it's a ton of engagement. And to your point, no one goes into education going, man, I really want to learn how to do payroll and finance. And so if you have a district or a charter network that already does those things, it really becomes pretty easy to say, look, we're going to have another site that it's micro school based. And I will guarantee, because right before I left Purdue Polytechnic, we started our own micro school. And we said, hey, do we have teachers who would really like to go work in this way? And people raised their hand right away, and then they took off and ran with it, right? And I guarantee there are teachers in every school building in the country who are like, man, if I could just go run my own thing with, if I could have 3 of us and we could have 60 or 70 kids, like, man, that'd be awesome. Well, you could do that, right? And again, there's almost nothing special you have to do to do it. You could even do it within your own building and say, look, here are these 3 rooms at the end of the hallway. They're going to be their own thing, and we're not going to bother them. You could literally do that next school year.
Right. Yeah. Love it. I kind of want to go start one myself.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe I'll get going on that after this podcast. One of the things you talked about, which I love, is talking about learning experiences outside of the school walls. Yep. and recognizing those. And one of the things that I've been talking to my 20-something-year-old daughters recently, and they're in really good places. My daughter's in law school. My older daughter has got her first big kid job and those types of things. But we look back and go, it was really the things they did outside of the school system. They had great education, don't get me wrong.
Yep.
But it was the internships that they did, the clubs that they were part of, all the things that were outside of the walls that really helped them excel, and grow and also feed their passions and things like that. And again, I'm not taking away from their education, kind of their core education. That was really important too. But other than setting themselves up for opportunity, those things were. There's no place to recognize that, like within the environment. So, what do you see as maybe missed opportunity when it comes to that, and what can be done to better recognize and better, I guess, encourage those types of experiences? Yeah,
and this is I don't know if it's the $1 million question, maybe the $1 billion question, right? I think it's so I'll do a couple things. Again, with my state board of ed hat on, in Indiana, we did a lot of stuff with we redesigned our diploma, new accountability system, and all of that work was designed to, as our Secretary of Education, Katie Jenner, talks a lot about, is reinvent high school, right? And it's really about creating conditions that enable that to happen. And so part of the diploma was recognizing that we have these portrait of a graduate things, right? In Indiana, we call ours the Graduates Prepared to Succeed, the Indiana GPS. And it's aspirational, right? And so we want students, again, to have the academic things as you suggested, but we also want them to be great communicators, collaborators. We want them to have responsibility. Like there's all these things. We want them to be civic and digital literacy. And none of those things can really be measured now in some ways, right? And I think what we did want to have happen is where students or schools go, okay, we're going to create a class on collaboration, and you could take the class, and if you get the credit, then you check the box. Like, no, are you actually a good collaborator, right? And I think the idea, and this is where I see a huge need. Everybody talks about AI in education, and I think some of the attention has been misplaced, and it really focuses on tools and personalized tutors for kids, and those are great. Like yes, we should be using those tools and be thinking about it. But I think where AI can really play a role is in like the education ecosystem, because now, honestly, if you're a school principal out there and you've got 1,000 kids in your high school, you're like, well, yeah, I would love to do personalized learning for kids, and I would love to have people be proficiency based, and so they can they could do things. They don't have to sit in an algebra classroom for 36 weeks. I'd love that. I got 1,000 kids and 50 teachers, and I got to have a schedule because I got to know where they are, and I got to be able to measure this stuff. And yes, I'm sure there's stuff happening outside of school, but I got no way to measure it. And there are no spreadsheets big enough to be able to allow students to move at their own pace and be able to track and maximize your resources, your teachers, in a way that you just can't do it. Like it blows up. We tried to do some of this at Purdue. We did it in the first year when we had 150 kids. It worked. The next year when we had 300 kids, it blew up, right? The scale got to you. Mm-hmm. But AI can do it. Like AI can be looking at, first of all, what is a student interested in? What do they want to do post high school? What are the skills they need to do that, both on the academic side and on the interpersonal, all the durable skills? What experiences are they having inside and outside of school? And so now AI is starting to get all the inputs. Like they took this test and they're doing well in algebra and they're moving on this. And they are the captain of the dance team and they're showing leadership and they're communicating well. And then if they decide they want to go do something different, now there's a different set of skills they need. And so I can help them chart a different course. But it can actually then start to maximize your resources. Say, hey, look, you've got 30 kids that need this skill. Let's say it's in biology. And so, hey, biology teacher, you need to do a seminar that's going to last a couple weeks, a couple hours a day for this group of 30 kids so that they can be proficient. And now they've got that skill and they go on to the next thing, right? But then there's a new group of kids who now need that 6 weeks later. They need the same thing, right? Well, you can't do that without AI. Like it's just impossible. And so I would love to see the ed tech sector start to look at that and go, wait, AI is scheduling everything in every industry except education, right? Now you have people using AI to create their master schedule, but like, great, that's awesome.
It's just building it in the traditional.
You just automated, the dinosaur. So, like, I get excited about possibilities because that could mean fundamental restructuring that can scale. Like, you can do what I just described at a micro school, and we're going to be doing that. We'll have some micro high schools next year with kids who are in apprenticeships, right? And so you can actually then start to capture what the student's doing in the apprenticeship and get both kind of academic, what I'd call little C credit, like they're doing bits and pieces of all these courses and their durable skill stuff. You can capture that and kids can move at their own pace. Like you can do that in a micro school, 50 kids, 100 kids maybe. When you start to scale above that, again, if someone's a principal of a 3,000 student high school, they're going to look at you and go, you are absolutely nuts. There is zero way I can do that. But AI can. We just don't have the tool set yet. And as I've talked to ed tech people, are like, yeah, you're right, but there's no market for it. Like, well, there's not going to be a market for it until the tools exist to make it possible. Like there's this chicken and egg thing that's going on. So I think it's going to happen. Like we'll see that, which then allows us, if we want to fundamentally restructure what high school looks like, and even going down into some of the lower grades as well.
Yeah. Well, it really just gets to kind of that just truly personalized.
That's right.
Kind of, we talk about that a lot, but it gets it to the point where it's each student has their own playlist within their environment, and what they do is also feeding their playlist.
Yeah.
If you will.
And I like it, the idea that I don't want to see where all instruction is, an AI bot delivering it.
Sure.
This lets you say, look, I'm still going to have teachers. I'm still going to have human beings delivering instruction. I'm just now able to maximize their effect because they're only teaching students who actually need the thing that I'm going to teach at the time they need it. Like that's like the holy grail, right? Everyone talks about that. Well, again, you can do that with AI. It can manage all these different inputs and aggregate it and go, yeah, I've got 30 or 40 kids who need this thing. Some might be seniors, a couple might be freshmen, like they just need it. And so I can do it just in time with every kid, and I don't have to have predefined groups of kids moving in block from one thing to another. I can mix and match, and and again, it optimizes everything. And I think as a teacher, imagine if you went to a group of teachers and said, hey, you only have to teach kids who really want the thing you're teaching. They'd be like, well, sign me up for that.
Yeah. Scott, I could ask you and talk about this kind of stuff for days. This is good stuff. I was wondering if you were going to get to AI. When I asked you about the innovation, I thought you're going to go right to AI.
Yeah.
I thought I was throwing you a softball there, but you said micro schools, which I love. And so that's good. Let's see. Maybe the last couple of questions for school leaders or school founders, executive directors, whoever listening right now, who really want to innovate but feel constrained by the existing systems. And you've kind of talked a little bit about this. What advice do you give them to kind of help them kind of push outside of this box that they feel that they're under?
Yeah. No, I think I have a pretty strong belief that almost every state has an idea like we need to move forward with something. And I think, and again, I'm a ask forgiveness, not permission kind of person. Like there are ways you can do this within the existing structures, and it could be pilots. You can start small. We talked about doing your own little micro school thing as part of your those are things you could launch easily. And again, all you have to do is report back to the state what they expect to see. Like they expect to see a transcript that says here's courses that kids took and here are the grades they got. Like, okay, how they did that can be radically different, right? And I think that's my encouragement to people is just do it. Like start small and completely voluntary, right? You're not making kids do it. You're not making parents do something they don't want their kids to do. You're not making teachers do it. You say, hey, look, I've got 2 or 3 teachers that have volunteered to kind of do this thing. And kids, if you want to do it, parents, if you want your kid to do it, we'll do it. And we'll learn together. Like you could do that with 30 or 40 kids. And I'd say, I would almost guarantee every single high school in the country would find people going, I want to do that. And the same thing happens at the elementary level. Like you could say, hey, I've got 2 or 3 elementary teachers that want to team teach and group and regroup, and we're going to do this. And again, as long as it was voluntary and you didn't make people do it, like I think people would jump at it. So that's my encouragement is go do it.
Absolutely. And I think the cover of the pilot makes a lot of sense. I mean, I remember every time as a school leader I wanted to do something, it was always easier just to put pilot in front of it. And it also gave you it's kind of a disclaimer. If it doesn't work, well, it's a pilot.
And we're learning and adjusting,
And it also kind of prevents you from feeling that, it has to be perfect, before you move forward. It's like, no, we're going to start somewhere and this pilot this and see where it goes. And,
absolutely.
And like you talked about with the Excel Center is sometimes you start something and you quickly realize, nope, this is not the right direction and you got to pivot.
Yep.
So, well, maybe the second to last question, what gives you the most hope right now for the future of public education?
I think it's those early beginnings of things like, I talked about the micro school stuff and the people who are willing to step out. There's enough groups and they're out there. It's Education Reimagined, Learner Studio, XQ, Carnegie is pushing for them. Like there's this groundswell of people who are like, hey, there's got to be a different way, a better way of doing this. And it's got a lot of really smart people in it. And you're starting to see this people willing to try, right? I think like Carnegie put together their high school transformation network, and it's a mix of charters and districts, and it's like 5 or 6 different states, and they're coming together to talk about here's what we're going to try, right? And I think you can get to some level of critical mass. And when I see the ideas, and I think I'm going to be with this group in Chicago next month, and like I'm excited to hear their ideas. And these are people who, again, for most part, are sometimes working in really traditional districts, and they're like, now we got to push the boundary a little bit. And I think that gives me hope. I see that, I see the excitement, and I see the infrastructure starting to get built around that. And you're like, okay, I really think this could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see a lot of policies that have changed to maybe give a little bit more space for these things to happen, right?
At the state level, yep.
Yeah, and we didn't get to that. Is anything that you want to share from what Indiana has done that you're really excited about from a policy perspective?
Well, I think what I would say is it has been a journey, and it's taken, we started on this probably, I've been on the state board, I think 6 years now. We started probably 5 years ago with some of this, and it's a seemingly somewhat disconnected series of things, but it actually was really well thought out. And I give again, Secretary Jenner a ton of credit. We started by saying, look, we have way too many standards. And so let's streamline that. We got our legislature to mandate it, so we had no choice. And so we had to eliminate a third of all standards across all subject areas, across all grade levels. And then of the ones that were left, only a third could be deemed essential. And so taking that and then say, okay, now let's redo our assessments. And first of all, we want
to. Was that kind of arbitrary, by the way?
It was
just kind of like, let's just a third. Okay.
Yes, just that seems about right. Like that just was kind of that thing.
I love it. Yeah.
But what it forced though was, because typically when people get together to do standard setting, every standard is crucial. And all of a sudden they were legislatively mandated to get rid of a third. And so that process happened. As then said, look, make the assessments focus almost entirely on the essential standards, right? And so, and to give a math problem, if let's say there were 100 English language arts standards in 4th grade, getting rid of a third says you're going to go down to 66. Then making a third of those essential takes you to 22. So now as a teacher, you can focus on the 22 instead of the 100. And now you're able to go deeper, and now you're able to start to do things like, we should do some problems and projects and get some hands-on, because now we know that the assessments are going to focus mostly on those 22, and we're doing a through-year assessment. So in the first 12 weeks, we're going to get an assessment, get the results back in a couple days, and I know which kids get it and don't, and I can reteach as I need, or I can accelerate. So we did that non-sexy blocking and tackling stuff. Then it was redoing our high school diploma to give a ton more flexibility to students and schools, and really start to encourage this idea of our durable skills, our portrait of a graduate, work-based learning, hands-on. So we did that, and then we just did the accountability system, which got approved a couple months ago, which reinforces the diploma at the high school level and at the elementary levels, brings in much more of a complete look at a kid versus just your test score. And then we got the legislature with the diploma to incentivize schools if they get we have what's called diploma seals, which employment, enrollment, and enlistment seals, that the highest level seals get incentivized by a $2,500 payment to the school per kid. So now the school is highly incentivized to get kids to high level seals, which creates more opportunities for the students. So everything kind of lined up, right? So I think, and at the same time, we also did science of reading, but I've been reading a ton of studies about that, and states who have said, yeah, we're doing science of reading, but they haven't actually invested in the infrastructure to support teachers. We did that, and we were fortunate in that we have a local philanthropy that's one of the largest philanthropies in the world that said, hey, look, we're going to pitch in tens of millions of dollars to support cohorts for teachers to learn and really understand the science of reading. And we've seen our reading scores take off. I think I saw something, we've had the 6th highest gains in the country in reading since the pandemic as a state. So those are things I think that have been really well thought out. really well done. The combination of the legislature, the Secretary of Education, and the state board kind of being in lockstep. So sometimes I talk to my peers across the country, and that is not true. And then it just gets dysfunctional, and you can't get anything done. We've been able to do all this because we've had that alignment.
Yeah, seems like that's maybe the exception for sure, not the norm.
Unfortunately,
so good, great place to be in. Well, Scott, this has been a great conversation.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time and just learning all the things that you've done and are doing, and your thoughts about the future of education has been really insightful. So I appreciate your time. So thank you.
Yeah, no, this was fun. Appreciate it.
For our listeners, thanks again for joining us. Make sure you come back next time for our any future episodes that we have. Scott, have a good day.
Thank you. Appreciate it.